We have invited Nixon Katembo, an analyst, for more on the situation in Kenya. Nixon, thank you so much for joining us. Now, what do you make of the no-show of certain judges who were billed to hear an emergency challenge on the vote?
Thank you for inviting me today. I think the no-show of the judges is not a surprising move. One, owing to how judges are selected in Kenya, and the whole question of institution systems within the country and how they are managed, how they move forward, and how they are run. One, and first and foremost, is these judges are elected based on political acceptance from both parties. There have to be a commission, or a judicial commission, that select the judges. Then names have to send to parliament, then approved, then the president have to sign in order to appoint those judges. But if you look at how events have been unfolding, I suspect that the judges themselves saw it fit that it will not be good for them to sort of be vetoing the earlier decisions that they have taken on the past elections. Therefore, ruling on this case today would have been seen as, circumventing the earlier decision that they have done. But there is an interesting question that we need to look at. The Jubilee Party brought a similar case to try to force Raila Odinga to come back to
and take part in
the elections. The case was certified as urgent, in as much as this case of today was certified as urgent. But however, this is where we need to draw the differences. Today's case was brought to court yesterday by supposedly activists.
Activists, yes.
But in real terms, these are opposition-affiliated members who come to the court and present the case. In other words, sort of a proxy case brought by the opposition to court. Now you have the ruling party bringing the same case. It was certified as urgent, and the court gave them 7 days. Now 7 days could have been elapsing on the 27th, which have been taken by event of the election of tomorrow, which is the 26th. Now, my reading is that the Supreme Court might have looked at this issue as well and said, no, if we are going to take this case forward and leave the earlier case, then we would have seen as bias. And that is one of the issues. Now, that cut across on how institutions are run in Kenya, more specifically such as the Independent Electoral Boundary Commission and the Supreme Court itself.
Now, Nixon, opposition leader Raila Odinga has come out and in addressing his supporters, basically calling for a boycott of tomorrow's election. Do we know how this is likely to affect the situation in Kenya? We have on the one side President Uhuru Kenyatta calling for people to come out and vote in their numbers, and the opposition calling for people to boycott the election. Do you think Kenya is fertile, the environment there? Is it good for elections to take place tomorrow?
Well, the elections, the environment, there is nothing wrong with the environment. The only problem is about the politics that these leaders are bringing to the fore, among them following those who are political party members or those who are support of either side. So the kind of message that comes from the political leaders is the one that is poisoning actually the environment. Otherwise, the common Kenyan would wish to go to the elections, put the election behind and move forward.
Do you think voters are going to go out in their numbers?
Obviously, if it does, it will depend on how the political mobilization have happened. And we have seen President Uhuru Kenyatta moving around the country, calling on his supporters and everyone else to go to vote. The question is, will it materialize? We've seen Raila Odinga on the other side calling on his supporters not to vote. But it brings two questions. One is the political legitimacy of the question of the elections. Two is the legal legitimacy of the question of the elections itself. But the legal legitimacy have been sorted by the legal processes that exist in place and the Constitution, because the Constitution mandates the Independent Electoral Boundary Commission to hold the elections within 60 days after the annulment of the first elections. So on the legal question, they had no option but to hold the election. But the legitimacy of these elections will come from the political process that have been murky up until now.
What is the, now we have a situation where there's been election observers there. What is the credibility now? They endorsed the previous election, which was annulled. Now they're there currently as election observers. What's your take on that?
Election observers, obviously, they have a role to play in terms of how election process and the democratic processes happen. But Kenya is unique in its own way because of the kind of ethnic affiliations. Everyone on both political sides maneuver his own following along ethnic lines to claim a political legitimacy. And that is the problem. However, elections observers have not been able to read into the local dynamics of the elections and try to understand how political leaders have been mobilizing their following along those lines.
Do you think we're likely to see, or should we be worried about violence taking place in Kenya?
Violence
going back to you know, the 2007 election, where there was a lot of violence after elections and a lot of people lost their lives.
Well, violence is inevitable in the sense that you have seen how the rhetoric coming from politicians saying there is a community targeted, Luos are being targeted, those who feel that Luos are marginalized, even some going an extra miles of calling for a secession. So that tells you that there is a violent atmosphere within the country. However, it will depend on the political leaders who get elected, especially in the part of the president, who now seems to have a free pass given the withdrawal of Raila Odinga, to how does he bring the country forward after the elections, if so happen. But there is another aspect to these elections where we don't know exactly what's going to happen, because there is a whole legal conundrum that can be following tomorrow's elections, in a sense that in today's processes at the court, the High Court, which led by Justice George Odunga, said that the commissioners, in other words, the presiding officers in all 290 constituencies, were selected, in other words, gazetted under an illegal process. In other words, they are illegal. So you have the process, the elections going on, but the presiding officers of those elections in the 290 constituencies being declared by the court as illegal. But at the same time, the court says that we cannot degazette these presiding officers of the elections because of the public interest that it attracts. But what does that tell you? It tells you that it opens a room for questioning legally the elections processes.
Nixon, we'll have to leave it there for now, but it is a developing story. Elections taking place in Kenya, and I'm sure we'll have a further discussion about this tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us. That was analyst Nixon Katembo, and he was joining us and updating us on the situation in Kenya.